that we're working with Neil and other people from Stand in the Park on, called No to Northeye, where we are opposing a asylum seeker accommodation centre introduced through new emergency legislation. So if you're interested in protesting, we will be holding our 11th protest next Saturday, 12:30, Little Common Roundabout, which is on the way into Bexhill. So you're obviously welcome to join us there. You may well get to meet the nice people from Stand Up to Racism who sometimes join us, and they also very often have socialist worker placards, so we know where they're coming from. So that's No to Northeye. And then I'll tell you about the Democratic Network, which is we support people who stand in local elections. Sorry, my voice is a bit dry. So about 8 years ago, we had a few problems with our neighbours, and in 2018 we got the ASBO of the year. So this ASBO prevented us from going to the beach near our house and was issued by Sussex Police and Rother District Council on the basis of false information provided to them by a policeman called Perry Lastwood, who may well be familiar to some people who went down the Port Manor pub in Crystal Palace, and our neighbours. It was covered in all of the newspapers because it was so ridiculous. It included preventing us from being perceived to be looking into any property in the village in which we lived in. So obviously being perceived to be doing something is not particularly kind of policeable. It was so ridiculous, a campaign group helped us oppose it, and we were in all of the national newspapers. The council weren't helpful at all, and that kind of sparked our interest in local democracy. That it went on for a few years, and the culmination of that was in February 2020, when we had a police raid on our house on the basis of false information by then PC Perry Lastwood, who was a Metropolitan Police officer who we did once see working in TSG. They raided our house, they stole our laptops, cameras, mobiles and everything, and kept them for 14 months. And then obviously in March we were sitting watching the telly, and this bloke called Boris Johnson came on and said that we all had to stay at home. My wife, trained as a doctor, we knew it was a load of bollocks, and then we spoke in Hyde Park, wrote about the stats, the death stats, and set up Keep Britain Free Sussex. Some of you joined those meetings. We were basically a support group, and we met every 2 weeks in person for the whole of lockdown as obviously a mental health support group. So that's the history. What we weren't expecting was that in March this year, under new emergency legislation, the Home Office announced that they would be accommodating 1,200 male asylum seekers in a village on the west of Bexhill. So this is a place called Little Common. It's 1 mile north of where we live. And there was a residents' gathering on April the 1st. We went along. I said, would you like me to stand for election in the May elections? And I was nominated on the spot by people who lived next to the site. Those of you who are familiar with local elections may know that it's not that easy to get elected unless no one else stands. And for the town council election, there were only 2 of us who put our names forward. I was one of them. They needed 2 people, and so therefore I became a town councillor on an uncontested basis. So if you're not actually that interested in fighting elections, what you need to do is to find a seat which is uncontested, and that's particularly the case for parishes and smaller councils where they kind of look for people to do things. So who likes emergency legislation? So the so-called emergency is the arrival of large numbers of mostly men, mostly young, mostly fighting fit age, across the sea from France, where probably most of them, if they did apply for asylum status, would not have been granted it. They have arrived through determination rather than desperation, and they are probably not quite as deserving as all of those people that they've left behind where they've come from. Nevertheless, if they do apply for asylum here, with the help of nice lawyers like Duncan Lewis, who get tens of millions of pounds supporting asylum seekers, they may well be granted asylum. And a lot of people have had enough because they see that it's wrong, that there are better ways that that money could be used, whether that be to spend 50 or 100,000 pounds accommodating someone over here. That's a lot of money. It could well be used in Bexhill. There are a lot of people who are homeless. There are a lot of people whose family members are on the housing list and can't get housing. And actually, for that amount of money, you could do a lot more good back in Syria or wherever these people are fleeing. I think it's wrong to think that these people are deserving. They may well be a bit desperate, but actually they're just determined to get here. So No to Northeye started back in April. At that point, they were due to start using Northeye to accommodate 1,200 men from September, from this month. And at this point, there are none there. The Home Office don't own the land because it still belongs to an interesting LLP, a private investment company, who magically bought the site in August last year. And what has been very good is that when we started opposing this, there were a group of people who already worked together, who knew how to do things, and who had all been going to stand in the park. So the guy who did the research about the private investors went to the stand in the park. They're an LLP which has a property company and two private investors who really kind of have no connection to Bexhill. We don't know who knew what when, how they found out about it, but nobody seems to want to talk about it. And at this point, we've been to Scampton and Wethersfield, where there are two other asylum seeker camps, and the Home Office, couldn't organise couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery. So we have had some interesting interactions with the council. Rother District Council have not opposed the camp, and we did want to ask a question at one of their council meetings, and so we tried to do so, but unfortunately, because we hadn't gone through due process, we weren't allowed to ask our question. So a few of us went and stood there, and we had signs saying, "Your silence, Rother District Council," or whatever, and we got actually into trouble for that. We've been warned about our behaviour, but in the meantime, we did a petition and we got 2,000 signatures, and as a result of that, we will have 15 minutes on the council agenda on Monday week. So there are a few people here who helped with that. So people power, if you find out how the democratic process works, once you know how to do it, if there are enough people on your side, then you are okay. And I was on Talk TV the other day, which is owned by my friend Rupert Murdoch, who is less evil than Google, I can assure you, according at least to a top hacker. It's going well. We will have our time to make our case, and hopefully Rother will oppose the camp, but we don't know, because we don't know who's in on it, whether they like the idea that they're going to get given 20 million quid, or whether they're going to whether they're going to do their job of representing the people of Bexhill. So that really takes me into my last bit, which is about the democratic network. So I've got a question for you. Could you put your hand up if you have written to your MP in the past 3 years? So, yeah. And could you leave your hand up if you got a satisfactory answer? Okay. It's quite difficult to get elected as being an MP, and so therefore what we figured out was that for the least amount of effort and the most reward, it's your local council that you want to be onto. So therefore, we started in 2021. 7 of us stood in local elections. We didn't do particularly well. We started at short notice, and so then we decided that we would support people, and we helped people in Brighton and in Burgess Hill this year. And I wasn't expecting to stand, but I did stand. So some of you may also know Roy. It's Roy Williams, who's over there. So Roy stood as the Police and Crime Commissioner, and next year there will be the Police and Crime Commissioner elections in Sussex and also in Surrey. We've got to decide whether we do anything for those, and then in the year after next, which I think is 2025, there will be county council elections. So I'm also part of this thing called the Independent Network. So the Independent Network is a group of established councillors which helps each other. And 2 years ago, there was a group in Newark and another group in Boston, maybe like some of you, who'd worked together to campaign on something, and they decided that they wanted to stand in the Newark and Boston elections. They had 18 months to prepare. They had people who wanted to stand, but more importantly, they had people who wanted to support. They had people who were going to do the admin. They had people who were going to do the flyers. They had people who were going to do the table, the outreach, and all of that kind of stuff. So if you are interested, we can help you to do that. If there are a few of you who think that you would like to stand in the elections, whether that be the Police and Crime Commissioner or more importantly the County Council elections, then come and talk to me. We've got a website, thedemocraticnetwork.org, or it might be that you've actually got some local independent councillors who are half decent, and therefore you can support them. The thing with elections is that there are 2 approaches to it. Some people want to make a point, some people want to get elected. If you want to get elected, you need a lot of people to vote for you. And in our case, the simple promise is that we will represent the residents. And that does mean all residents. And in the case of Northeye, virtually all of the residents don't want the camp, and therefore it's been really easy. So we have an important issue on which most people are unified. But if you do want to get involved, let me know. And the other thing that's been successful is taking over the Town Hall Square by tabling questions in good time, and then you get a follow-up question in some case, and know your stuff, keep them on the spot.
The resistance has to be active, Nigel.
The resistance has to be active.
We have to be active.
Okay, thank you.